Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I have a little bit of a project update on a shawl that I'm working on that I kind of told you guys I was going to start working on last week, and made a little bit of progress over the course of the week. And then I think the rest of the night I'm going to be working on the hair for my doll. So I showed last week that I was working on some embroidered eyes, and I think part of the reason that they look so bizarre on the doll is that there's no hair. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all the hair in, or at least start to, and then try the eyes again and reposition them and see if it looks a little bit better. But while I'm doing that, you guys are welcome to ask as many questions as you want, or have as much chat going on with me as you can. So that's the part of the stream that I really like is, talking with you guys. So if you have questions about crochet or yarn or projects you're working on or things you want to share, go ahead and put those in the chat, and I will get to all those questions as the night goes on. Let's see. Catcraft and Stephanie both saying hello, welcome, and welcome to everybody who's watching. Thank you for joining me. And I'm sorry that I forgot. I meant to post on Tuesday that, we're officially moving the stream to Thursday nights. I mentioned it last week in the stream, but I didn't actually post anything on Instagram or Facebook or anything on Tuesday as a reminder. So, thank you all for joining me tonight. So this is the tendril shawl that I'm working on. So I'm using Sock Obsession yarn in, I think it's called Hotter Cousin. And then the tendril shawl is by Carmen Heffernan, which is Annie's Crochet Design. I'm not sure. That's just what the name of the blog is that this is from. So, but this is the tendril shawl. It's pretty straightforward. It's a 4-row repeat. So once you get going, it goes pretty quickly. It is pretty nice because it's charted. So there's a chart you can follow along with. There are written instructions you can follow along with. It's relatively simple pattern with mostly double crochets. And maybe some chains, I think. Yeah, I think it's double crochets and chains. And I think the ends have some triple crochets, but it's relatively straightforward and easy to follow. Looks like my husband put the link up in the live chat if you want to get to it. So I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. It's building pretty quickly, and it's going to be a really nice, long, wraparound. I can already tell because this is pretty little yarn so far. And it's already, it's not quite wearable, but I could probably put a button on it at this point in time and, make just a little bit of a lacy thing to wear. Yeah, it would be a little bit bib-like, but with, a jacket, it wouldn't look so odd. But I have this much yarn left, which is, I was guessing, probably about 75 or 80 grams left. So I'm not very deep into this ball. And I think it's going to make a pretty nice shawl. I'm really happy with how it turns out, or how it's turning out. I really like kind of reminds me of ice cream. It's got kind of a tan and sand color to it. Reminds me of a twisted vanilla and chocolate cone. It's not quite dark enough for chocolate ice cream. But then there's all these little sprinkles all the way through. So I think we're probably trying to change. Nope. Okay. I keep moving it around too much to change camera, but that's how it's turning out there. I think I can move it there. So kind of tan and sprinkly, and it's got a pretty nice look to it. So and then if you want to flip-flop back real quick, I'll open the lace up a little bit so they can kind of see what this is going to look like blocked. So this is what it looks like right now. And if I open it up, you can see the lace there. And then there's there's 3 rows of lace and then kind of a more solid section, which kind of breaks it up and looks really nice. Those edge rows also form like the edge of these points. So you've got these more solid edges on the points. So that whole solid row runs all the way through and out to the edge. So it's a pretty cool shawl so far, and I've been very happy with it. So I'll keep working on this. It's probably going to take me a little bit, though it's a 3-day weekend, so who knows what'll happen. Maybe it'll be done by next week. It's a 50-50 toss-up. Stephanie says she's jealous because it never gets cold enough in Florida to wear anything that she makes. I feel like it doesn't bother me. I will wear a shawl in August here, if I want to. Wool is warm, but it's not terrible. Like, I don't actually mind wearing a shawl when it's hot out. And I work in a mixed environment where it's partly in the office and partly in a manufacturing environment. And in the office, I don't mind wearing a shawl indoors. So it really just depends on what your work environment, I guess, is like. But yeah, I can see how you wouldn't want to just wear a pretty large shawl around in Florida. I've been to Florida a couple of times. It's always so humid. That's really the thing that sticks out in my memory about Florida. So, it's pretty humid here in the summer, but at least it doesn't do that weird thing where it rains for like an hour and then it's miserable for the rest of the afternoon, which is what I seem to remember of Florida. Like, it rains every single day and then it's just super humid forever. So she says she still wears them and carries them around. So honestly, they're kind of nice that you can like have a shawl in your bag, and if you're going in and out of air conditioning, a lot of times I find that I need something, but not like a full sweater, and a shawl does a really nice job of filling that gap. So, all right, so here's my doll with no clothes and no hair and no nothing. I have the hair color that I'm going to use here. And so I'm going to show you how I do hair and how, like, my favorite way. And then, like I said, we can just kind of chat throughout, and I'm going to work on placing hair. The first thing that you need to do when you're doing hair is find some way to cut all your lengths the same. I don't recommend like a back and forth where you try and like lay the yarn. I've seen people do this before where you like can go back and forth and then you get all your loops and you snip them. It's just a real pain. What I do is find any rigid thing. In this case, I'm using like a notepad. You can use a CD or DVD case. You can use just a chunk of cardboard that you've got around. And as long as so what you're aiming to do here is wrap evenly. So you don't want to pull some really tight and leave some really loose. I'm actually going to throw this ball down on the floor so that it's got a little room to pull. But you don't want to leave your wraps really, really loose and then some really tight, because you'll end up with different length hair. They're not all going to be identical, but if they're all similar, you can trim them or you can just leave them, because hair just isn't all the same length. Having perfectly uniform hair is going to look really odd too. So you can see with my doll here, you can't tell. I mean, you can tell that it's not all the same length, but it doesn't matter. Big old white fuzz in there. But kind of ends up with some like layers, actually. So I just wind, and I try not to wind completely on top of each other, because then you end up getting longer and longer because it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you can always make more as long as you hold on to whatever object you did your winding with. So be careful not, if you use like a piece of scrap cardboard or something, Be careful to hold on to that so you can make all your, if you need more hair, you can make more. But yeah, so once you get a pretty good amount on there, you can just take your scissors and snip it. Set that off to the side. And then depending on what object you've chosen, sometimes you can get your scissors along the edge and underneath. Because I've chosen something that's pretty rigid here, it's a little bit more difficult. So instead of cutting along the edge first, I'm going to slide this off the edge just a little bit. Kind of sliding down and holding on to this loop here. So I've got my loop. And then all you got to do is get a good pair of scissors and cut all the way through. And so now I have a whole bunch of equal length strands. This piece is from my first wrap, and I'm just going to get rid of that one. But I've got all these strands of hair that I've made now. And I'm just going to pick them up one at a time and place them in the doll's, like, scalp here. So I'll show you how I do that. I'm actually wondering if these are long enough. Yeah, I think they're going to be fine. So that is one thing. Whatever you wrap on, you're going to want it to be long enough for your strands. And your strands are going to be folded over in half. So this is going to go in and it'll be two pieces of hair hanging down. But they'll only be half as long as the yarn that you cut. So all right. So when you insert your hook, you want all of your hair. How do I want to explain this? Let me show on here. So all along the edge of this scalp, all of my knots face the same direction. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this super clearly, but I inserted my hook all the same direction so that all my knots face the same way. And then when I got to the center part, I reversed it so that the knots lay the opposite direction. And there's actually a real part in the middle here where the knots line up against each other. And I don't know if there's enough light for you to see that. Okay. So there's a ridge here where the knots change direction. And that just helps the hair lay the way you want it to. But all through the hair, I've made sure that my knots all go a particular way so that the hair lays nicely. So in this case, I inserted my hook facing up, I think. Hold my, yeah. So I can undo a single strand and just double check, but I'm near positive. No, I went the other way. So I inserted from the center facing out. So that's the way we're going to do it because I like the way that doll's hair's. So I'm going to go from this side, and actually I am going to stay off this last row because, as I explained last week, I've made some eyes, and they're over here. I've got these eyes, and I'm not totally sure they're going to work, but they look ridiculous without the hair, and I want to try them out with hair. But if I hate them, I'm going to have to put eyes on here that are just going to be the black safety eyes, like this doll has. But the only way that I can get back in and put these eyes is to take the scalp back off. And so I've left the tail of my scalp here. And I've got a really nice long tail so I can tell which one it is. And I can unsew this, put the safety eyes in, and all the hair will come off with it. I don't even really need to get very far in. If I can just open a few of these, I can place the eyes from the outside. All I have to do is get the backs on. So I just need to open up enough stitches that I can get my fingers in here to squeeze the backs of the safety eyes on, if I have to. So I'm hoping my little embroidered eyes will work once I get some hair on here and it doesn't look so crazy. But I am going to stay off this stitch line. Normally I would work right against the stitch line, but I'm going to go one row up. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm just going to go, yep. We'll change cameras so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to take my hook and just go under one stitch. So I'm just putting it in a hole and coming out the hole just the other side of that stitch. And you can kind of just leave your hook in there. I probably ought to switch hooks so you can see a little bit better. But there is the first, and so what I did was I folded this piece of hair over and roughly made them even. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to spend a lot of time making sure they're absolutely perfect. Like I said, hair isn't perfect, so it looks more natural without it. But I'm just using the hook to pick up the loop and pull it back through. And then you just draw this loop up just a little bit and tuck your ends and pull down. And that's one piece of hair. And so this is kind of a tedious process, but you just go into the next space, grab a new piece of hair, hook it on here, pull up a loop, and pull your tails through. And then it's just kind of over and over and over again doing this. So, like I said last week, this isn't a terribly interesting thing to watch, but people were interested enough that I said that I would go ahead and do this on live stream. So hopefully this is interesting enough, and hopefully some people have some questions and we can chat while I'm doing this, so you're not just watching me sew in individual strands of hair. So I don't know, this is a character. Is character the right term for this? Yeah, so for those of you unfamiliar, there's a I don't even really know how to describe it. It's a set of YouTube channels of anime style characters, and it's something that I watch some in my spare time, and that's what this character is based on. So it is an anime style character that I'm just copying. So but trying to make it close. Most of this is just kind of freehand. I did use the pattern, the Danielle doll pattern from Carmen Rent, same as this doll over here. It was the same pattern base, and then I just freehanded the dress. But I've had a lot of fun making these dolls and just kind of doing whatever with the like the outfits and styling the hair and whatnot. I haven't really been following a pattern on that. So this has been a lot of fun, just kind of going through and sewing in. It's tedious, but it's kind of a fun, like, I have a lot of fun sometimes in really nitty gritty detail work. I had a lot of fun doing repair work on a lace tablecloth. I've had some, you know what I mean? Like, there's, I wouldn't want to do some of these things day in, day out, but there is sometimes some fun in just really getting into the details and trying to make something relatively perfect. So, sometimes you got to be a little bit careful as you're going through here not to split the next row of stitches. They'll tuck up underneath each other, and they can be a little bit difficult. It's not the end of the world if you do. You're kind of covering everything up with all of this hair. I find it best to work from the outermost portion of the scalp, and then kind of, so I do the bottom row and maybe one more row in here, all the way around pretty much. And then I do some up here in the top. You don't want to put a strand of hair in every single stitch. So I'll do, like I said, a row or two down here, and then a bunch up in the top or like the crown of the head. Fix all of my like bang area, the part up here. But then once I've got kind of like a base to this, I'll go through and just kind of selectively add some hair in here. If you get too much in here, it's going to be really, really fluffy. More like this doll. I did go pretty heavy, but there are whole sections in here. So to get to the back of her head, there's whole sections in here where I skipped big chunks of scalp. So you can see there's a row here, and then there's a couple of skipped rows, and then there's a couple of stitches. But I kind of just, like, here you can see there's a whole section of scalp that doesn't have hair. And you don't really want to give 100% coverage, or it'll never lay down. It'll just totally stand up, and there will be nowhere for the yarn to kind of go. So I've like I said, you can fill in a couple of base rows, and then sort of up here, get this right, and then go in and piece in between. And it really, that's the best way I've found to do it, is just to kind of fill in the middle portions later, so that you don't add too much bulk. So, all right. What are you guys working on? So I've got this amigurumi, and I've got the tendril shawl, and then other than that, I don't think I have anything major that I'm working on. I've got a handful of projects that have finished up. Mostly I've been working on sewing masks, and then we've been working on learning how to embroider custom designs on the embroidery machine. And so that's been a little bit of, actually a surprising amount of like engineering going into that. So, it's a little bit of art, or like copying art, and a lot of like trying to get the programming to work properly to make the make the designs behave. Buckle Bunny says, I was going to ask if you could skip every other row. I'm working on a baby blanket. If you could skip every other row of the hair. Yeah, I mean, every other row might actually even be too much. So I would do maybe the outermost row, and then skip a row and do another row in here. And then you can probably skip several rows and do the crown of the hair, and then come back and kind of piece this in. Jane Rogers says she's putting a border on a blanket. I forgot, I actually do have a baby blanket that I'm going to make. So I want to go through or not go through. What do I want to say? I was going through Joanne Fabric looking for a few mask fabrics, and came across some pre-cut Harry Potter fabric, and it's all in pastels. And I have a friend who is having a baby and big Harry Potter fan, and so I thought the pastel Harry Potters would make a cute little baby blanket. It's going to be a thin blanket because it's going to be a layer of cotton and a layer of flannel and no fleece. So I did make a baby blanket like that in the past, and it ended up being a really like welcome change, because sometimes you just need a little bit on the thinner side blanket, especially like in the winter if you've got a kid in a snowsuit. They don't really need another blanket. What they just need is like a windbreak, so that they don't like completely overheat. So they just need something thrown over their car seat so that it's not, blowing wind. Or in the car, it gets really hot once the heat gets going. Sometimes a thinner blanket is welcome. So, otherwise, it's just a cute crib decoration, I suppose. But I did buy that fabric, so I probably will do that as well. And those are pretty easy to do because they're just a border, no body of a blanket. Let's see. Buckle Bunny says that they just finished a diamond painting of Denver Broncos horse head. I've never done one of those diamond paintings. I've seen them and they look really cool. And then I'm never sure if I'll actually enjoy them or if they'll just be like it's a fine line between meticulous and fun and just like really really in the details and I guess monotonous. So I'm never sure how things like that are how I'm going to feel about things like that, but they look really cool when they're done. Um and then the other thing I'm not sure about with those is how they hold up over time. I'd hate to spend all of the time doing one of those and then have like the little diamond sticker, whatever they are, come off over time. So I don't know if you're supposed to like frame them to keep them stuck on or what you're supposed to do at the end. But um, they kind of seem like to me somewhere between paint by numbers and a crossword puzzle. Or not crossword puzzle, but just a puzzle. Yeah, a jigsaw puzzle. Um, the last jigsaw puzzle we did was kind of terrible. The print quality wasn't particularly good, and so the pieces were actually kind of like hard to tell if they were the right part. If I remember correctly, wasn't super great. It's really pretty. I ended up gluing it and hung it up, but the individual like resolution on each piece wasn't fantastic. So, um, but it's been a while since I've done a puzzle. So, they said it's addictive and oh, got one to try and the story goes on. Yeah, I could see how that could be. They seem like the kind of thing that it would be really easy to get addicted to. Um, just like people get addicted to jigsaw puzzles and paint by numbers. So, or I guess it could also be like adult coloring books where it's a lot to pay attention to, little teeny tiny details. So, oh, Jane says that she's made several diamond paintings and had them framed at Michael's. So, um, that's that's probably the best thing to do with them. I wonder, you probably could also coat them in like puzzle paint or Mod Podge or something. They would not probably not look as nice as being framed, but it would be less expensive, I suppose. If you wanted to hold on to them and sort of make them poster like. Yeah. So you can start to see as I go through here, the hair is starting to build up and looking pretty sad with like not a whole lot of volume going on right now. Very stringy hair. I mean, it is string, so not surprising, but well, I guess it's yarn, but still. Um, not a lot of volume yet. So I actually I didn't think that I was gonna like this color as much, but as I'm working with it, it's growing on me. Um, like I said, it's copying a an existing design, so it's not much I can do to pick and choose the colors myself because they are what they are. But It's kind of fun trying to find the exact right shade. Though what that means is I end up not using yarn out of my stash that I should be using. I'm sure that I own something that would have sufficed, but I did go and buy exactly the color that I wanted. Um, so, but I'm happy with the choice, so I guess that's what matters. Um, I have a picture up on the screen of the character I'm working off of. Doesn't look like she's got much of a part, so I think I can just build out from the crown of her hair. Her bangs have a part, but that's more styling than it is needing to put a part in. Yeah. Um, kind of wondering if I should have put these in the other way so they laid a little flatter, but I think I like the way that they're turning out. I can tighten these down this way a little bit so that they don't have quite as much bulk coming up. If you put the knots up, they'll lay flatter, but then the next layer will kind of be puffed against the knot. I put the knots down so that they kind of sit up a little bit and give a little bit of volume to the hair. Otherwise, it, like I said, it lays perfectly flat, but you don't necessarily want it to be perfectly flat. I kind of like a little bit of volume to the hair, so, but you can control a lot with just the way that you're laying the yarn in, and how much you pull it and which way you kind of position it. It kind of locks in more than you'd think. So, but yeah. So I'm trying to think what else. It's disappointing that there aren't any, like, there's no yarn shopping this year. So I did do some online yarn shopping, but I miss going to the yarn festivals and fairs. Though I suppose I'll appreciate them more next year because if you go to the same shows over and over again, they tend to get a little bit samey. You see the same people and the same yarns. And what I've noticed is a lot of vendors have sort of the same thing as each other. Um, you'll see, as much as I like Harry Potter, you'll see 50 different Harry Potter yarns, and then from a bunch of different vendors. You'll see everybody has a Game of Thrones line. Everybody has a I'm trying to think what else. Disney princesses seem to be pretty like popular. And so you'll start to see a lot of like samey things. The other thing is you'll see a lot of yarns that are just too much. There's too much going on, or they're trying to like convey too much in just a single color. Because they've chosen some obscure, like, I don't know, I don't want to say topic, but like theme, I guess, is the and so you got to get like the whole essence of some really complex thing across in just like a ball of yarn. So, well, a lot of it is cool. Some of it can just be a lot to look at, and um, I guess there are vendors that I like quite a bit that do things maybe not simply, but do one thing really well. For example, Twisted Fiber Arts does gradient yarns, and they make just absolutely stunning gradients, and they do it really, really well. And they have, I don't know, what do you think, like 14 different colors on a bunch of different bases, and that's really about it. And what they have is every single color that they have a shawl on the wall, and the whole presentation is really just something to behold. And then you go other places and it's a little bit too much chaos, and it's um too much theme and too much speckles and too much color altogether. And sometimes I really, really like it, and sometimes it's just too much. Um, and so I think I'll probably appreciate it a little bit more next year because, like I said, it can get a little samey, and you're like, past that one, past that one. Like I've seen them every year for 5 years in a row, and it's all the same thing. And so I'm really looking forward to going back to fiber fairs because I really do enjoy it. But I think the break might actually end up being good for me. Just renew my interest in some of the stuff that feels a little bit same over and over and over again. So, you guys, okay, let's see. Stephanie says, had to step away and see that I'm talking about yarns now. I've seen the yarn be hand dyed fingering weight yarn. Looks interesting. Authentic hand dyed tonal. $14.99 for 420 yards. $14.99 for a hand dyed tonal yarn is a reasonable deal, especially because Hobby Lobby has coupons all the time, but it's not like super far off of just indie dyed yarns. I think yarn store brands I usually place at about I don't know what, like $11 to $15, and then you get into indie dyed yarns and you're at about $20 to $25 for 100 grams. So, assuming that it's nice fiber, it's probably a reasonable deal. But if it doesn't feel amazing, I think for that price I would probably jump up to a local yarn store brand. Though I have not seen it, and I can't say quality or how well hand dyed it is or anything like that. But that's starting to get into the range where you're kind of back and forth between whether you make the jump up. Though, like I said, if you can get it for 40% off and it's pretty reasonable quality, then um, I think it's probably a pretty good deal. We got a hand dyed from somebody. Lion Brand, maybe? Um, Somebody released oh no, it was the Turkish company, Ice Yarns. Ice Yarns had a hand dyed. It was okay. I wasn't like over the moon with it, but it was pretty well. It was pretty. It was not the worst feeling fiber, but it was a little bit scratchy. It wasn't like the squishiest, most amazing yarn, but it was reasonably nice. So, um, what fingering weight local yarn store yarns would I recommend? Oh Lord. Cascade Heritage Sock is one that's usually in like the $10, $12 range. That is, I think, hand dyed. Certainly a tonal yarn. That one always seems very nice to me. It's got a nice feel to it. It's probably mostly wool and some amount of nylon. But that one always feels really nice to me. As far as like local yarn store, like basic yarns. And you can always go crazier at local yarn stores. Trying to think what else. Haiku's Kobasai is pretty nice. That's a cotton bamboo silk blend. Though I think that one is $10, but I think they're 50-gram skeins if I remember correctly. Which puts it in a more expensive price bracket if you need 100 grams. What else comes in a 100-gram fingering weight? Local yarn store. I think Cascade probably has a 220 in fingering weight. It's not as common. That would make it a 50-gram skein as well. But it's usually like $6 or $7, so that puts it back in that $15 range per 100 grams. Trying to think. I mean, there's always indie dyed yarns there. I think Heritage Sock is the one that's coming to mind, like really prevalently in fingering weight. I'm trying to picture the section at the yarn store and what's in it. Yeah, that's the one that's coming. Oh, Madeline Tosh. Madeline Tosh makes Tosh sock. That's probably my favorite local yarn store brand. It is hand dyed, but not necessarily indie dyed. It's usually in like the 20 to 22-ish dollar range. So yeah, think I think those would be my top two choices. Would be Madeline Tosh or uh what was I? Madeline Tosh or Heritage Sock from Cascade. Let's see. Viviana says that my hair looks amazing. Thank you. It's getting kind of faded. But it's in kind of this cool, like, I don't know, unicorny state right now where it's starting to get to these like bright pastels still. So it's probably got about another week and then it's going to look like trash. But right now it looks pretty cool. It looks really bad if it's not curled. It's an interesting thing that they don't really tell you about Vivids, but you have to kind of heat treat them to make them look as awesome as you want them to. If you just like let your hair dry, it doesn't come together. I don't really understand it, but yeah, so thank you. And like I said, probably got about a week and then it'll look really insane. And then I'm gonna have to get it redyed. Stephanie says that she knows that I work in science and was going to recommend an indie brand local to her called String Theory Colorworks. They're all science themed, but mostly striped. I feel like I've heard of them. It's interesting though because I think that there's a local to me indie dyer, and not super local, more northern Illinois, but I think they're just called String Theory, and I think that's what they're called. Maybe that's the yarn store. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. So String Theory is a yarn store. I think Stunning Strings is what I was remembering. Which is a pretty cool yarn dyer. String Theory Yarn Co. And where'd you say Glen Ellen? Okay, so I've been there. That's a separate. I was confusing two names there. So String Theory Yarn Store is in a suburb of Chicago that I've been to, and been shopping there. String Theory Colorworks. My husband pulled up the website so I can kind of look through, but it looks like they do a lot of self striping. There's some cool colors in there. I don't make socks, so self striping gets a little tricky to work with, but I'd be willing to give it a try just to see what kind of interesting things I could make happen with the self striping. But yeah, so And then Catcraft said, what themed yarn would you like to see? I don't know if I have a preference on a particular theme. I just know that um I don't know, the like I said, sometimes it just seems like it's everybody's doing the same things. I like when I find something totally off the wall. Um like we stopped by one vendor and they had a whole My Little Pony section, and it was like it didn't it wasn't that I was desiring My Little Pony. It was just fun to see something uh that was just not like the same four things that we see over and over again. Um but it really depends on the day and what kind of mood I'm in as far as yarn shopping goes. There are some days where all I want are brights and crazy colors and lots of chaos. And there are other days that I want all solids and like fall colors. And it doesn't really depend on the season. I've been to yarn shows in like April and I'm like, I want all fall colors. That's just what I was in the mood for. And then there was one time that I was really into like teals and orange. And I was like, I don't know where that came from. That's not even a thing that I like. Actually, one that I was really like, I had in my head this like picture of a yarn that I really wanted, and it was red, almost this red, and like a toothpaste blue mixed together. And I did eventually find what I wanted, but for some reason that was what I had stuck in my head. And those are not colors that I wear. They're not colors that will go with my hair, but that's just what I was in the mood for. And so I think part of it is just not that I desire to see any particular theme, but that I desire to see variety so that when I'm in weird moods that I can find what I want. Because when it comes down to it, if everybody has the same theme, everybody has the same colors too. Because there are only so many colors that you can do that say Harry Potter, like their primary colors. And like I said, I love Harry Potter, but if that's not what I'm in the mood to see, it's not gonna do anything for me, and it makes me like skip past a whole bunch of booths with nothing interesting for that particular day. Oh, you know what the other one was that we kept seeing everywhere? It was Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and Outlander. That was the other one, and it was all earth tones, and they were pretty, but it was like 7 booths of Outlander. Let's see. Jane Rogers says, I think Green Mountain Spinnery in Vermont has some fiber stash, might be another one too. I'm missing context on that comment. I don't remember what I was saying at the time when that came through. She might be referring to the local yarn store Yarns. Stephanie, oh, she responded to you saying that it's just called Authentic Hand-Dyed Tonal. It's not showing up on their website yet. Okay. Okay. Stephanie says she crocheted with their sock striping yarn and it looked cool. Oh, she made fingerless gloves. That's a good idea. That would approximate roughly the same size as a sock. I guess one of these days I'll probably try crocheted socks, but I have it in my head that they're not going to be good. I know I have a book full of crocheted socks. I just feel like it's going to be walking on lots and lots of little knots. And that just doesn't seem like it's going to be very appealing. Jane said that it was, the local yarn store yarns. So that's, she was responding mostly to Stephanie, saying, giving her some suggestions. Catcraft's asking if I've used Leading Men Fiber Arts. Yes, I have. Actually, kind of a lot. They're probably one of the more local dyers to my area. They're in central Illinois, though pretty far east central Illinois. And they were actually the first local like indie dyer yarn that I ever used. I made a virus shawl and didn't do an amazing job, but the yarn looked nice. And then probably the shawl that I wear the most is my lizard shawl, which I actually call my dragon shawl. But it it's Leading in Fiber Arts, their soliloquy yarn base, which is 100% BFL, which is blue faced Leicester, and it's in the color London Fog. And I don't remember why I know that offhand. It's right here actually. But it's this shawl here that is actually similar to the one that I'm working on in that it's going to be this asymmetrical long wrap style shawl. But this shawl I probably wear more than anything else because it lays nicely like this. So I get a lot of wear out of this. This is Leading in Fiber Arts, like I said. They're 100% BFL. The BFL is not a soft yarn. It's not a bad yarn. But it's not plush or cozy, but it shows stitch definition like I can't even explain, and it holds a block just forever. This shawl, I can't even begin to guess how much I've worn it, and I always like take good care of it, but none of the stitches have collapsed. I have other shawls that have been blocked, and this lace would be completely collapsed, and it just doesn't. It holds its shape forever. I think I've washed this a second time and reblocked it, but it gets a lot of wear without being rewashed or reblocked because it just doesn't need it. Where like you can see this shawl is kind of completely collapsed back down even though it's been blocked a couple of times. But this is alpaca and wool and doesn't really hold a block at all. Stephanie says she has pics of the Yarn Bee yarn from today that she can send over. They're really new. And she's making crocheted socks right now and they look cute. Like I said, I've seen a lot of cute patterns. I just feel like it's going to be walking on knots, and maybe I'm just making it more of a big deal in my head than it actually will be. And Catcraft likes the shawl, I believe. So, anyway, so yeah, the Leading in Fiber Arts does a nice job, and we see them at a lot of fiber fairs. One, because I think they attend a ton of them, but two, because, like I said, they are relatively local to us. And so anything in traveling distance for us is in traveling distance for them. What do I prefer to wash my natural fibers with? I was a big fan of Soak. It seemed like pretty nice soap. And I don't have anything against it, but I bought a pretty large bottle of their yuzu scent right when I started crocheting. And about 3 or 4 washes in, I really decided I did not like it. Not the smell of it. And I kind of was stuck with the bottle. I didn't really feel like just getting rid of it. It really wasn't so expensive that I should have just gotten rid of it. But I kept using it and kept disliking it. So I tried Unicorn Fibers Fiber Wash. It's okay. The smell didn't wow me. It was pretty neutral, just kind of generic soap scented. The one that I'm using right now is Eucalyptus, and I think it's grapefruit, and that's probably my favorite scent so far. It's just lightly fruity, and the smell kind of goes away pretty quick. But any what do I want to say? Any no rinse soap is fine. That's usually what I like to wash. So mostly like a lukewarm water and a no rinse soap. So you put a little bit of the soap in, you put it in the wash, you squeeze it out, and then you lay it to dry. And it does not need to be rinsed out under water to get that soap out. They're no rinse soaps. So that's what I prefer. Helen is asking, I know I'm late, is this how to put hair on dolls that we make? Yeah, so that's what I've been working on, and I've just been slowly going around. So I've got my first layer of hair on this doll. And you can see her bangs are way too long in the front, but I will trim those up as appropriate. It will be easier once I place the eyes to kind of, I can pull the hair off to the side, and you can already tell, like, even with just one layer of hair, it looks much more doll-like than it did when we started. It's not great hair, but it's still better than it was. And so all I'm doing is I'm basically hand sewing in each strand of hair. Or it's not really sewing, but I'm taking my crochet hook, and so I'm going to skip a row here, and I'm going to go up, and that's not skipping. There's my skipped row. Just popping my crochet hook under a stitch. So I find a gap and go through a gap and then come out a gap. I take a strand of hair that I've already cut, put it on my hook, pull it back through, and you just pull that loop up just a little bit, grab your two ends, and pull tight. And it doesn't look like much, but as you keep going around the circle, you get hair built up pretty quickly. And this is kind of one of those, like, little fussy tasks that you can do slowly. It's a good task for, watching a movie and doing something. It's a little bit, not mind numbing, but what do I want to say? Like, you don't really have to think about it. You can just kind of sit and sew in the hair. As long as you have a relatively laid out plan when you begin, it kind of just doesn't matter. So I'm just going to kind of go around the circle, and I can talk with you guys, but there are a number of different ways to make doll hair, but this is my favorite because you can really control it. You can also do crocheted doll hair. There are a lot of patterns where it's a lot of single crochets made into strands of hair. My mermaid is done with crocheted hair. So all of the hair is crocheted into a cap, and then that's attached with the long strands of hair. Is my mermaid around? Usually within a few feet of me. Yeah, it's over here. So this is a different style of hair, but all of this hair has been crocheted, rather than being like this, where it's yarn still. I mean, it's all yarn, but this is just strands of yarn. Christine says it's like fringe. It's exactly like fringe. So I've done hair both ways. Helen's asking if I do a wig cap or make attached to the doll head. So I've done, this doll had more of a wig cap. Each of the pieces, or like the sections of hair, are sewn on, though it is multiple sections. This doll, I basically put each piece of fringe or hair in by hand. So there's no additional wig cap or anything like that. And there isn't really a right or wrong way. It's a different type of look. Theoretically, if you did a wig cap and you found a different way to attach it, you could maybe have like changeable hair, if that's something you wanted to do. But this particular doll, I want to have stringy, I guess, hair. I want it to be more hair-like and less crocheted. So I'm doing my hair like this. And just kind of working through. It doesn't really matter how big of a loop you pull up. when you do this because you're going to pull it back tight. So whatever is comfortable to get the ends through. And like I said earlier, it's not super important that these ends are dead on matched up because hair isn't perfect. You've got hair that's slightly longer and slightly shorter, but you want them close so that you don't have to trim them all weird. So I'm just kind of going through, staying one row up. As I said before, you don't want to pack the hair in too dense, or it won't really lay down at all, and you'll end up more of a fro than a a hairstyle like, at least like I'm intending for this doll. So, but you can see as I'm adding this second layer of hair, this doll is looking more doll-like as it goes. And if you can't see her bald, I mean, it doesn't look terribly bald because her scalp is the same color as her hair. But you can see that's starting to fill in. And actually, if I just pull this back, give her a little bit of a comb over, and there. If you were gonna wear or pull a hair all the way back or something, you actually don't need much to get pretty good coverage. So, but like I said, I'm gonna do another row up here, and then I'm gonna start filling in the crown of the head. And then, depending on how it looks, I can go in and piece some more pieces in to give it more bulk in particular places. But this is the back side of the doll's head, and this is the front up here. And she needs a part in the center of her bangs. So, yeah. But this doll in particular does not have a center part here. So I'm going to not change direction with my hair and keep it all going the same direction. When I worked with my other doll, I did want to put a center part here. And when I did that, in order to make that part, I went in sideways and then turned my knots so that they went opposing directions along this part. And then that created the part. Because I'm not putting a part here, I'm going to continue to go this way with my hook, keeping all of my knots going the same direction up to the crown of the hair. So that's kind of a difference. If you want to put a part in, at some point you need to identify where the part goes and then work your knots sideways. So instead of your hook going down, it's going across the stitch. And it's relatively easy to make that change, but if you get those knots going in opposing directions. So on this side of the part, I'll go this way, and on this side of the part, I would go this way, and then with those knots butted up against each other, they make like a nice flat part. So, let's see. The mermaid is awesome, thank you. And do I do many stuffed animals? I've been doing more recently. I've done a stuffed rabbit ballerina, and I did a little fox. I've done a couple of really gigantic stuffed animals, a couple of giant elephants, and a partial giant giraffe, that needs to be finished eventually. Let's see. Helen's asking, what about curly or crocheted hair to attach to it? Curly hair is usually done with, at least what I've seen is done with curly cues, which you need to, like the mermaid, what I did here is just crocheted into the edge of a chain. So chain down and then crocheted into the edge. And in order to get actually these curled up pretty readily, just all on their own. I think my chains were a little bit too tight. And so all that it takes to make a curl is to put more stitch on one side than the other. So if you crochet your chains really tight and then you put big single crochets in, they'll kind of curve over because they're taking up more room than the chain. Alternatively, you can put multiple single crochets into the same chain, like an increase stitch, and that will force it to spiral into a curly Q. And so you could make individual curls and like sew them onto a cap. You could sew them directly onto the scalp. Or in the case of this doll, it's going to be a little bit tricky to show here, but I pull this up. What I did here was made a like half circle, and you can see there's, well, this is the full circle. Where is the half circle piece? Oh, that is it. Okay. So you can see on the edge, if I turn far enough, I made like a half circle out of double crochets. And then at the very end, as I worked the last row, so I started with this stitch. I chained, I think, 25, and then did 25 single crochets back. And then slip stitch to the next stitch. And then chain 25 and work 25 single crochets back, slip stitch to the next stitch. And then continued all the way around, all the way to this edge of the semicircle. And then that made all of these curls all along the bottom of that circle. And then I stitched that just straight to the head. And so you've got this whole section here that has no curls and no like additional hair. But that's how I got all of these curls on the end. And that was a really easy way to just add a whole lot of curls without having to like stitch each individual one to the scalp. So that's what I did here with this. And then the top and sides are similar. This piece here, the part, is chains. And then as you work up the chain, you go, 25 down and 25 back up, slip stitch to the next chain, and you keep going. And then you go, when you get to the first chain, you go down the other side and just pick up all the loops on the other side. So you end up with kind of a centipede looking thing that you just stitch down. So all of these curls, let me see if I can pick them all up. Not that one. Yeah, all of these here are just stitched down this center part here. So, and then similarly, there's a circle in the center. So you start by making just a flat single crochet circle, and then you do the same thing where you get to your last row of your circle, and then you start chaining and then single crocheting back up and slip stitching back to the circle. And you get all of these like wig pieces that are, I don't know, pretty easy to attach then. So you only have to sew one item on rather than each individual curl. You can just chain and then single crochet back in, and you end up with one like piece of hair that you could then sew on, but then you end up sewing every single strand of hair to the doll. So it's really up to you when you're doing doll making like this, how you want to proceed and how much time and effort and what kind of hair and what kind of look you want it to have. That's really the fun of doing this type of project. Christine says I do a great job and that she's enjoying watching the process, and this is my niche, I guess. I don't know if this is my niche. It's something I'm really enjoying doing right now. I get in moods. So right now I'm kind of in a doll mood. I'll probably get back into a shawl mood now that I'm making this 100-gram fingering weight shawl. And then I'll make a bunch of shawls. Then I'll do something else, fingerless gloves or hats or whatever. But I've kind of go through cycles. So this is what's been fun recently for me is just um something something kind of easy and also kind of nitpicky. Like where I want it to be, I can really focus on details, and where I want to just zone out a little bit, I can. So I kind of get the best of both worlds with this. I can do tons of teeny tiny little detail work, or I can just sit here and, kind of zone out and chat with you guys and just slowly sew in hair. So it can kind of go either way. So I don't know. I enjoy this right now. Helen says, so you didn't do them individually. I never thought about that. I know that about curling yarn in the oven with wooden dowels and then cut them up and put them in individual. So yeah, that is an option. You've got to be a little bit. So I think usually when that comes into play is with acrylic yarns. Though I don't see any reason that wool wouldn't work. In fact, wool you should be able to handle like hair. I don't know that I would go so far as to say you could curl it with a curling iron, but you should be able to curl it somewhat like hair. So, yes, you can do pin curls or dowel curls um, with hair. I've seen people set them in the oven. I've seen that done with like Barbie dolls and like little action figures and stuff that have like acrylic hair. My Little Ponies is what's coming to mind when they have the plastic ones with the acrylic hair. And you set them in the oven at real low temperature so you don't melt it. Um, and you can get it damp and brush it out and do pin curls. I did that with an American Girl not too long ago. It was a real pain, but it ended up looking really cool. I didn't set it in the oven. I did pin curls with water, and it looked a lot better at the end. Um, but I did spend an absolutely absurd amount of time doing doll hair because pin curls take forever. Let's see. Stephanie says that she's been in an amigurumi mood for the last few months, making a purse. Yeah, I think it's the nature of some of the like just the nature of crocheting. You get kind of in a mood of doing something. And some people only ever do baby blankets, but they'll get in a mood of doing the same baby blanket because they just found a pattern that they absolutely love. Um, and some people do, only knit socks, but they'll do, 10 of the same sets of socks because they found some pattern that they just really can fly through or really like. Um, so it's one of those things that you just get in a mood or get in a rhythm and it works really well, and then you just abandon that for a while and do something else that you get in a mood for. Um, Buckle Bunny's asking if I sell my items. They usually end up making stuff for family and friends, which is okay. I prefer not to sell my stuff. It's really stressful. Pretty much all the way through the whole thing. You, I at least I feel like, it's a toss up because what it would actually cost in my time and my materials, most people, one, just won't pay. But two, like, I I like to work with what the things that I like to work with. So if I want to work with a merino cashmere yarn that costs $32 for 100 grams of it, and that's what I'm in the mood to work with, I don't really want to be limited by somebody saying, well, you could just use this $5 yarn that I saw. It's like, I'd rather just not. And there's nothing wrong with the $5 yarn, but if that's what I'm in the mood for, that's what I'm in the mood for. And so I like just making things, and if somebody likes it or if I think it's appropriate for a gift for somebody, I just give it to them. And it makes me happy, it makes them happy, and I don't have to um really feel like I'm being limited or feel like I'm working against any sort of timeline. Every time I make something for somebody, I it just always feels very stressful if they know that they're getting it or if they're offering to pay for it. And then I really don't like pricing things. Um, the few things that I've sold, I've really had a hard time figuring out what to sell it for because I I want to price it so that it's not totally um how do I want to say it? The things that I've been paid for have been they want like somebody wanted a bunch of hoods for their kids. The crochet hoods with the little ears on top. And I didn't mind making them, but I probably wouldn't have chosen to make 6 of the same thing in a bunch of different colors. And by about the 4th one I was really sick of it. And it's really hard to price like I don't want to do this. And how much is it going to take to make me do it? Um so that's kind of a interesting thing because the price of materials was only a few bucks. It was relatively inexpensive acrylic, and I think it was only 1 ball per hood. Really wasn't a big deal. Maybe it was 2 per hood, but still they were like $10 in materials. It's just I didn't want to do it. And after like the 4th one. So um I don't know. It felt like there was no amount of money I could have charged to make me more interested in doing more of them. Um, so I don't know if that makes sense. It might make more sense to people who have sold items, but I strongly prefer to make what I want to make and give it as I see fit. Occasionally I will make something with the intent of giving it to somebody. And almost always then I'm working against a deadline, like a baby blanket that I want to make for a baby shower. And it's never as much fun as just making things and then, it comes around to somebody's birthday and I look through all of my shawls and pick one out because it's a nice one for them. And it was something I enjoyed making, but didn't have to work against any sort of deadline or demands or anything like that. So, Stephanie's asking if I make anything for my husband and what does he like or request. I'm trying to think what I've made crochet wise. Made a teeny tiny lobster, which I think we ended up giving to a visiting coworker. So, in his line of work, he's got international guests sometimes, and I think we gave the tiny lobster to somebody who was visiting. But I'm trying to think. Yeah, I've made little amigurumi characters. I tried to make a pair of like fingerless gloves, but they weren't quite what he was looking for. I think he had sort of a particular thing in mind. Um, yeah, he doesn't really get cold or do cold. Um, so like hats and gloves and scarves don't really interest him so much, but he likes looking and helping me pick things out. Um and you know, giving me ideas on color combinations and things like that. And photographing what I make, but he doesn't really request much of anything. Um yeah, I think probably little amigurumi on his desk is about all I make for him. Um, Buckle Bunny says I do all kinds of stuff like crocheting, embroidery, diamond painting, coloring, cross stitch, journaling, whatever I feel at the moment. Um, yeah, I think that's just some some crafters get into one very very specific thing and only do that thing. But I think the vast majority of us kind of dabble all over the place, and there's probably one thing that each of us likes the most. Crocheting by far is mine. But I do some weaving, and then I'll do some jewelry making, and then I'll do some sewing, some embroidery, not hand embroidery, machine embroidery, and then I just always come back around to crochet. So, there's kind of there's moods in crochet, and then there's crafting moods in general. Um, but but yeah, I think that's true of a lot of crafters, that you can kind of float around and keep yourself occupied in all different kinds of ways. She also says that her husband crochets as well, which is pretty cool. My husband does a little bit of circular machine knitting, on the little plastic knitting machines. So that's actually kind of cool because we can like sample a lot of yarns. So when we do a big unboxing or something like that, we can really work up really quickly and see how the yarns are going to behave and what they kind of look like worked up. Even though it's pretty low effort, it gives you a lot of information about a yarn, pretty straight away. So um, he was making like hats in, I don't know, an hour or two, of machine knitting, and then cinching them up and sewing them, and um, so it, like I said, it gave us a lot of information pretty quickly. Um, Buckle Bunny says that she likes sewing and quilting in the winter, and that she's ready for the snow, which she might be getting next week. You must be a lot further north than we are because it is still 80 degrees here. And I don't suspect it's going to drop 50 degrees by next week enough to snow, though I wouldn't be surprised if it could. But as far as I know, it's still planning on being 80 tomorrow, and it's pretty unlikely that we'll get snow anytime soon. So, um, oh, she's in Colorado, so not north, but higher elevation, which also does the job. So, or theoretically higher elevation, I assume. Um, but but yeah, that'll also do it. So, um, yeah, I can't believe it's already September. Somebody at work wrote the date on a piece of paper, and I was like, that can't be right. Like, how could that be? And I was like, it actually is September. I don't know what happened to the whole summer or even the whole year. It kind of feels like it was just March and we were home for COVID, and I've kind of lost track of most of the summer. So, um, it was like the longest March ever, but it doesn't feel like it's done being March yet in my head. Um, so Buckle Bunny says they've already had snow in the high country. So that's, yeah, I guess I don't think about how early it snows elsewhere in the country, because like I said, it's still supposed to be 80 tomorrow here. So, um well, with all that said, I got quite a bit of work done on my doll. I'll probably do some more work over the holiday weekend. Um, but but yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with how the hair is going in and laying and starting to look already. And I'll do a little bit of. I'll probably get the hair in and then retry. And actually, I could retry the eyes now that there's hair and see if they look any better. With the hair laid there too. And not that far apart, they don't look. Well, maybe that's where they go. I don't know. Are they the wrong? Yeah, that's the problem. They're the wrong way around. So, they do look better. I don't know if they look good, but we'll see what happens. So, I can stand her up and hold her eyes on. So, they do look better with hair. Like I said, I don't think they look good, but um doesn't help if they don't stay on. So, I yeah, that was one of the other things my husband reminded me. We discussed putting so they're on white fabric right now, and there's a very thin white ridge all the way around the eye. And I wonder if I match the fabric to the skin tone, if they'll blend in better, if they look so weird because they're standing out, or if they're just gonna look weird because they look weird. Is a little unclear. The other thing I could try doing is seeing if I have some really dark colored, uh, like dress pins and pinning them down, like sewing pins, and just pinning right through the center of the eye and holding them on so that they like look more normal, and then trying to tell if they look good or not. Because like holding it with my fingers, I'm kind of covering it up and like making them flare out. But if I pinned them from the center, I might be able to get a better idea of how they look. Because I've seen dolls done with not embroidered eyes, but painted eyes on fabric, and they don't look bad. So I think this still could be a viable option. I keep knocking her eyes off. So, but yeah, I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap up for the evening. Um, Suggestion to color the edges with a marker. I could try that. I just don't know if I have a marker that would be a match for the skin tone, but I could give it a try. Um, yeah, there it might be worth trying. What I really need to do is find my good embroidery scissors and try and trim them up a little bit more, or just better tiny scissors. The tiny scissors that I was using were nowhere near sharp enough. And so I couldn't really get in nice and close. I also probably don't actually need left-handed teeny tiny scissors, but I was missing my left-handed scissors with the left blade up so that I could see along the edge a little bit better. Um, but it's actually pretty difficult to find left-handed tiny scissors. You can get left-handed like dress shears, but teeny tiny ones are pretty hard to find. All right. Well, with all of that said, I think I'm going to wrap up for the evening. All of you enjoy the long weekend, assuming that you're in the U.S. and have Labor Day off. Otherwise, just enjoy your regular weekend. And I will be back. Again, we've moved the stream officially from Tuesday to Thursday. And so we'll be streaming on Thursday nights instead now. Thursday nights just work out a little bit better for me, and it seems like they work out pretty well for most of you. And so hopefully you'll be able to join me at 8 p.m. Central Time on Thursday nights. And if we're not going to stream, there should be a notice on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere that I post. There should be a notice that we are either canceling or moving the stream And so hopefully, if we're not streaming, you get notice about that as well. If you are not already a subscriber, if you hit the little bell, and then there's a little drop down next to it that will turn notifications from suggested to all. And then every time we go live or every time we schedule a stream, you should get a notification so that you know that we're streaming and you can come join me. But with all that said, I guess have a great weekend and see you next week. Thanks for joining me. Bye.